a small town was developed in the Arctic named Solar City, courtesy of some risk-taking adventurous techs. The billionaire tech named Todd Jackson and his best friend and partner, Alex Green. They wanted to develop ways for people to live in the Arctic and explore the unexplored. They had spent years getting their plan perfect. They had researched and planned on how to get that uninhabited, barren, and icy land capable of sustaining life. Todd picked up some undeveloped land through the government, trading their tech for climate change research in exchange. The government was also too happy to let them have a go at it. With the way the population is increasing, the more places there are to live, the better. So that's how they gained possession of 15 acres of land comprising of nothing but ice. Alex picked up a crew of about 100 to work the 15 acres of ice and snow that was just a few minutes away from the nearby mountains, and they were all set to work the frozen land. Food and other resources were flown in once a month there, while the crew set up solar panels to power the town they now called Solar City. That was the beginning of it all. 10 years later, and that barren piece of land was now a fully functioning town. They had faced many problems during this long and tiring process. They had come across many setbacks and lots of resistance, both from other people as well as nature. The climate conditions had been very harsh there, and it was so hard to survive there without the optimum measures. A little carelessness here or there could prove fatal for them, and it did too. They had suffered many losses early on, and some of it even included the loss of man-force due to their unfortunate passing away. They were sad and heartbroken over that, but they did not let up. They continued in their setting up a base in the Arctic. All their sacrifices and harsh days had paid off though. They had just recently expanded their town's growth, along with Alex's hydroponic greenhouse just outside the town that was maintained by a crew of 10. They were all settled down at Solar City, and many people now called it home. After long years of braving the harsh cold, they were now content in their humble abode, living their peaceful lives until a stone was thrown into their calm, bringing along a storm. The government wanted to conduct research in the Arctic. It was said that some new information had been revealed and now needed to be further looked into. The government had asked for the assistance of Alex and Todd, along with their town resources. All further details were kept hush-hush, and nothing else was revealed. All they were told was that they were there to collect data on a recent satellite scan. Soon, 10 of the world's leading scientists were flown into Solar City. The woman in charge of the whole expedition was named Dr. Margaret Hardaway. She and her crew were sent out to recover something deep within the ice. After trying some further prying into the matter, Alex was told the same thing over and over again. It was classified. The very next day, 4 military choppers were also flown into Solar City, carrying heavy-duty equipment for the dig. Military snow runners brought them out, miles from the town. They kept driving for a while, taking different routes and different turns, trying to find the location they were supposed to be at. It was about 3 miles from town when they finally brought their vehicles to a halt. One of the scientists stepped out of the truck with a device in his hand, slowly walking around as he listened to it beeping. Once it had reached quite the shrill pitch, The scientist raised up his arm and started yelling loud and fast.
This is it! This is the spot!
The rest of the scientists, 7 of them, quickly jumped out of the vehicles and set to work. They were mapping the whole area with the help of that device. Soon they had taped up the whole location. Other military helicopters could be seen flying over the mountain, carrying a large drill as well as other equipment for the expedition. As soon as they had gotten a hold of that place, it was time for the people from town to head back. They had to before the scientists could actually start their work, confidential and all that. So some military men walked them back to their trucks, asking them to return to Solar City. Most of them were asked to leave, so they did. But 2 of Alex's men were asked to stay and help them set up camp and bring back a week-long supply of food. So Alex and Todd went back to Solar City along with most of their staff, leaving only the select 2 behind. Things, however, started to look a bit bleak a week later, because it had been about a week now, and Alex never heard back from Dr. Hardaway or from either of the crew they had left behind. It had really started to concern them now, because it was not supposed to take this long, especially without any communication in between. Todd looked out the window holding his cup of coffee, watching the others as they began their daily duties. He was standing in their office, chewing his bottom lip in thought, while Alex was pacing the floor of the room, equally worried and restless.
I haven't seen any military copters fly over in 3 days. I just hope things are coming along all right out there. Nothing unfortunate's happened,
he said, finally stopping his pacing and sitting down in a chair.
I've been trying to reach out to them by radio, but all I get is static,
replied Todd, heaving a sigh.
You think we should go check it out? Just have a look and see if all's okay there,
Alex questioned, thoughtful and apprehensive all at once.
We can't, Alex. You know we can't. We can't be there. It'd violate the rules and guidelines set up for this agreement,
Todd replied, just as apprehensive.
Like damn hell we can't. 2 of my men are out there with him. I can very well not stay here when heaven knows what the hell the poor lads are going through.
Alex just might have actually screamed.
Look, man, I'm just as worried, but we have to look out for ourselves too. We have to keep our end of the deal. We can't just...
Todd tried to reason with his partner.
Like hell we can't. I'm going in there, and I'm going to get to the bottom of this. They should have told us what in blazes is going on there if they don't want us to go see for ourselves. I will not leave my men to suffer an unknown fate. So you can come with me or not. It's all up to you. But you can't stop me,
Alex let out in frustration and stormed out of the building.
Just wait for me, you moron. I'm coming with you,
Todd replied, just as frustrated. He slammed his cup down on the table and headed outside. Alex and Todd jumped into the Jeep and headed out of town and in search of the answers to the doubts plaguing them. Soon enough, they had reached the scientist's base camp. As they approached, they could tell that something was definitely amiss. There was no movement, no machinery at work, no digging or dumping happening there whatsoever. There was no hustle and bustle, especially considering that over a dozen people were residing at that camp. It was far too quiet for being a site of active scientific expedition. Alex pulled up right beside the camp, and they quickly exited the Jeep. They immediately had to cover their noses and mouths and hold their breaths, because they were assaulted with a very pungent smell. They tried, but they could not exactly place it. It was somehow very familiar, but not at the same time. It was strong enough to overpower everything else around them, Even the biting frost did not manage to stifle the stench. They walked a little farther and saw that there were clothes and other belongings strewn all over the camp, but no people inside. None whatsoever. Todd and Alex looked at each other, apprehension for the unknown clear as day on their faces. This did not bode well for them, or anyone for that matter. Todd took a deep breath and started yelling out for anyone to answer as he walked into the main tent and promptly fell to the ground. Alex hurriedly followed behind him, only to stop dead in his tracks too. There was a large tub right in front of the door and filled to the brim, filled with blood. There were bodies strewn all across the tent in various states of undress. Bones and muscles were exposed in different areas of the bodies. The arms and legs, the fronts and backs, faces and sides. Nothing was left untouched. And what's more, it didn't look like the flesh was cut from the bodies. It looked to be ripped from the limbs in some places, but in most areas, it appeared as if someone had bitten the flesh off, leaving impressions of teeth all over the bodies. Someone had been eating them. Alex and Todd stayed rooted to their spots at the scene presented in front of them, frozen in shock. Whatever they had been expecting, it definitely was not a cannibalistic massacre. Todd scrambled away and stood up. He needed to get away from the blood and gore as soon as possible for his sanity, as far away as possible. He turned away and tried to walk out the tent, all the while holding his mouth, trying not to vomit from the sight as well as the smell. It was the smell of raw flesh and blood. Now that they had seen it with their own eyes, the origin of the smell came easy to them. As both of them were struggling and trying to get out, they came face to face with a sight even more haunting. Dr. Hardaway. Half the flesh had been pulled from her face. They could actually see her cheek and jawbones and her eye socket from the inside, as well as her shoulder socket, because her arm was almost completely torn off. It had been practically ripped away from her body, barely hanging on by thin tendons. The worst thing was she was actually alive and walking around, stumbling right into the tent as they were trying to leave. Before they had even digested the horrible sight, she grabbed onto Todd, begging him to get back to town before the ice monster could return. She was panicking, babbling. She might have gone delirious with the pain and the horror she must have seen for heaven knows how long. She was not making any sense. Alex sat her down and tried to calm her. Todd found a bottle of water nearby and brought it to her, trying to make her drink. But that proved mighty difficult. She no longer had any discernible lips or mouth. It was all just some jumbled bones. After they had calmed her down a bit, she began regaling them the tale behind the horrific reality they now found themselves in.
We were digging here because we saw some unusual sightings from our satellite imaging. We soon discovered a large block of black ice deep in the hole we created and rotted back to the surface. We took samples from the ice and discovered it was holding some kind of human being going back 40,000 years. A day later, we discovered that the man in the ice was moving. So we worked around the clock, trying to chisel him out. Once he was free, we took notes of his vitals and ran other tests on him. When he gained consciousness, He was understandably confused and restless. We tried reasoning with him and tried to make him understand his predicament. We tried to communicate with the Iceman, but to no avail. Instead of calming him down, we just managed to aggravate him even more. Soon, he became aggressive and then violent, attacking the crew and going after anyone that came near him. All of our calming efforts went in vain. That thing does not calm. Soon his attacks turned from merely assault to downright cannibalism. He'd snatch the person closest to him and rip them to pieces, eating him and drinking his blood. He didn't leave anyone. He would rip out their necks and leave them hanging in here to collect their blood and move on to his next victim. He chased everyone around. Now he goes out there in search of God knows what. Maybe his old mates or some new life or something. But he came back here every evening as the sun was setting to recede and feast. This has been going on for at least 5 days. He destroyed all our equipment in his rage so we couldn't contact anyone. I don't know how I survived for this long. But I had to warn you when I heard your voices. Leave this place immediately. Please, go back and save your people. It's only a matter of days until he reaches Solar City, and he will wreak havoc. You have to leave before it's too late.
Maybe it was the adrenaline talking, or her need to save the others that had kept her alive all this time. But as soon as she was done talking, she slowly stopped breathing, and with her death brought along loud bangs and explosions that could suddenly be heard off in the mountains. Alex and Todd looked at each other and hurried outside to see the commotion, only to find a military copter about to crash into the mountain. Wondering how a military helicopter could lose control like that, they saw something jump from the vehicle onto the side of the mountain. The thing that jumped out was undoubtedly the monster they had just been hearing about. It was large and hairy, and looked right in their direction. Even from half a mile away, they could sense that the Iceman had made them their next target. Both of them started running towards the Jeep and began speeding back towards town in an effort to warn the others before tragedy struck them too. They could see that the Iceman had started giving chase. They did not get much of a head start because the creature was freakishly fast. They knew they did not have much time on their hands. As soon as they reached town, they gathered everyone into the main building and tried their best to explain the predicament they would soon be in. They locked everyone in along with themselves and stationed some soldiers outside the building. It only took about half an hour before all hell broke loose. The large Iceman was upon them. He could be heard outside the main building fighting with the soldiers, and with a sinking heart, they realized that their guardians were no match for that creature. He alone was standing his ground against a dozen of them, going strong and showing no signs that he was stopping and giving up anytime soon. Alex and Todd turned towards each other, knowing that it was not going to be long when the monster was upon them too. Their only protection for now was just a door separating them from the Iceman. But they had thought of a plan in the time they were stuck in there, wandering and thinking. Alex quickly grabbed a broom from the supply closet and lit the end of the wooden handle while Todd held the can of lighter fluid in his hands. They could not just stay there and wait any longer while people were dying outside. That would just be delaying the inevitable. They unlocked the door and opened it slightly. As soon as the Iceman noticed the door opening, he took it as an opportunity to attack. And so he did. The Iceman slammed the soldier's body against the floor, growling. He held the legs of the soldier in each hand and pulled, ripping the soldier in half, from legs to head. Everyone stilled for a minute at the horrific show of strength and brutality, and also to mourn that brave soldier. In the next minute, Todd ran out from the door and tossed the lighter fluid onto the creature's face and body. The Iceman abruptly stopped his growling at the sudden attack, blinking in confusion. Taking advantage of this, Alex jabbed him with the broom, setting him on fire. They both backed away, watching him scream and howl in agony. Soon he started running into walls, trying to find a way out of the building. This in turn started a fire in the building itself, which rapidly began to spread. The survivors ran from the building, watching the Iceman burn, along with the town they labored over for so many years. It was all turning to ash in front of their eyes. 2 military helicopters approached the village, but it was all too late for help. Nothing could be done except to watch it all slowly burn away.